Alright, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Just kidding, just boys. Alright, so I unfortunately don't have any any of my headphones at work. Otherwise I'd have a better microphone. But yeah, so right here you can see I have, let's go back figure really quick so you can see I have my lap time 2:0, 24 gallons, 79 degree track temp. So track temp is pretty varying. Dan's, yours is probably right now the most accurate. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get, oh, Dan, I'm seeing this now, but your lap time only has 1 gallon, and I used a filter for no less than 10 gallons of fuel, but whatever, we'll run with it. But yeah, so we'll analyze this, and we'll go literally from turn 1, and we'll go through. Hopefully you guys decide to watch this. If not, I understand. I'll try and keep it as quick as possible. So let's dive right in. So sector 1, and we can kind of see. All right, so really quick, in case people don't really get on Garage 61 that much, so this data bar right here is line distance, this is time delta, this is your speed, throttle input, brake input, your gear is up here, RPM not going to matter as much, and then your steering wheel angle is down here. So we'll talk about that. And so it's based off because I have the fastest time, it's all based off my data. So my data is the 0, and all the other laps is showing essentially. So, but we can come in here to turn 1. Good thing is we can really see where turn input is. So it looks like two of you guys, so blue, Dan, and green, Breno, you guys are turning in really early. You could probably turn in a tad bit later. I'm curious if we all kind of keep the same speed, but braking inputs, so you can see throttle inputs is, let's get a little bit more into the weeds. So throttle inputs, Breno, you spiked again right here. Austin, you're off pretty early, but that is not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing. You're off early, and then you're braking, I guess, the times, because you're off throttle here, and then you're starting to hit the brake. There's probably a 40 to 50 foot gap from the time you're full off throttle to the time that you are on your brakes. So you might be able to stay on a little bit longer. There's a telephone pole kind of right over here. That's like my reference point for a lot of stuff. That, or you know how the wall kind of comes in right here. That's also a good reference point for start essentially preparing for this left-hander. So but you can see, so I was able to carry, if we go down to the very bottom, Austin, you were able to accelerate early, but you're also coming down the slowest mile per hour, so 99, pretty much right at entry right here. You're at 98, and then you start accelerating again while we're all still decelerating. So corner entry, you might be able to take that a little bit faster. You might be able to brake less also. That might be why your speed's dropping down very much. Here, you got a pretty high brake input. My highest is 51%. And then Dan's highest is 36%, 37%. And really, Dan's brake trace is probably the better one here. I have a really bad tendency to mash the brakes early and then taper off. And I really need to learn this brake trace here. Breno, I will say here, it looks like you're downshifting very early. But that also is, you're also braking a lot more than you probably need to be, and then you're holding it. If you brake a little bit later, if we look at 88 feet versus, I'm braking 40 feet later than you, and then Dan and Austin are about 60 feet later than you, and then you're downshifting right away. That might upset the rear a little bit going into this turn one. It doesn't look like you got any oversteer in your steering wheel trace. Austin, it looks like you might have had some oversteer. Yeah, you had some oversteer right when you got to 100% throttle at apex. So, yeah, maybe, that little bit less brake going into it. I have 24 gallons of fuel in my car, and this is my brake trace, so it's just, my car's for sure heavy. So yeah, you could probably just brake a little bit later there, or a little bit less, sorry. And Breno, yeah, I'm not sure what this spike is. That might be a downshift. Yeah, that's a downshift. Okay, I can see it in the data. That's a downshift. So yeah, you're downshifting really early. If you see here for us, we let off the throttle, and then, well, that's crazy. Oh, I don't downshift until about right there. So, sorry, I'm spending a lot of time. Turn one is probably the trickiest turn on this track, that and Sunset. So, I'll probably spend a little bit more time on those two than the other ones. Austin, you can see here you had to actually let off, and I would assume it's because you probably started going a little wide, or you thought you were going a little wide. Where's that trace? Yeah, you might have seen here and thought that you were going wide coming through. I had to let off too because I was going wide. Again, my lap is not the perfect lap to be comparing to. I'm just giving you guys a comparison for, a realistic lap time between us four. So, all right, let's move on. So if we go, then we're going to go, so turn one, turn two, let's dive into that just a tiny bit. This is the whole little section right here. We'll get a little bit more detailed. So coming into here, Breno, why does it look like you're maxing out at the top? You might need to check your brake pedal or check your software and see if you're getting limited at the 62%. You very well might be only able to get 62% of brake pressure, which is really not good. If you're going to limit yourself at anything, I would limit it at like 80%. Just pointing out for that. So here, Austin and Dan, you guys led off early. Breno and I led off at the same time. Damn, I almost have... This might have been, yeah. I'm hitting the brakes and I'm still 50% throttle. It's a little crazy. But going through, everybody seems to have a matching brake trace, so that looks good. Breno, I would just say that this right here, you got to figure out why you're being capped out at 62%. We'll see as we go on if this is a very common thing, because if you're being capped at 62%, that's not good. That gives you no window to be able to stop if you're accidentally, braking too late and going into somebody. That could be you could end up rear-ending somebody because of that. So you just got to look at that. Nothing looks crazy here. Yeah, and you can see, Breno, because of your limiting, you are holding the most speed, but then have to slow down the most. But everybody's trace looks pretty similar there. It looks like for that, Dan, you're 0.2 off, Austin, you're 0.1 off, and Breno, you're 0.3 off. Breno, I think you'll see a significant change if you're able to get that up. I'm going to stop bringing that up, sorry. Probably a little bit annoying. I did want to look at the exit of that second. So, Austin, you got on the throttle a little early. I'm sure you've realized that, though. Probably pushed you out wide. And then, Breno, you're getting on a little late. So if you get on a little bit earlier, it might help the car rotate, but you're also going to deal with burning out rear tires pretty quickly by using the rear tires to help it rotate. So, but other than that, I have the most brake pressure at 52%, and we all essentially brake within, so that's the first 35, 40, 35, 68. So we're all within 20 feet of each other. Austin, you could probably brake a little bit earlier, which would keep you from having to get back off the throttle here. And then the lines, I guess the lines look a little bit coming through. Yeah, I stay a little bit wider because I like opening the turn a little bit more because I can use the throttle to help rotate the car. That's why I can get on a little bit earlier. You can see my throttle trace is going up a little bit sooner, although Austin's is, but he had to come back down. So, all right, now we're coming off that straight, going into the hard braking zone. This is a make or break spot. So a lot of passes might happen here, but you guys gotta, we obviously just gotta be careful. So Austin and Dan, you guys are, Dan, you're braking very early. So if we look, so this is where your brake trace starts, and we can look here. So right here is where your brake trace starts. If we zoom out a little bit, come a little bit further down track, and right here is where everybody else would start braking. So it is 62, It's like 80 feet later. I'm very bad at math, guys. Don't judge me here. But 26. Sorry, that's like 60, right? Yeah, 60 feet. So everybody else is breaking 60 feet later. And Dan, you also, it looks like you're being capped out right here at 53%, 54%. You held that. If you can peak a little bit higher, so I get all the way up to 80. I'm limited at 80, so I capped mine at 80%. Everybody else's break trace is kind of lower than that. So you guys can probably break later if you get that brake pressure up some and hold it for a little bit longer, and then you can see. So I'm starting to taper off right as I start coming into entry, so you can see turning at the bottom. So I'm turning in and I'm tapering off. And then I'm completely off. I'm off. As soon as I'm off the brakes, I am able to get back onto the throttle there. I have to level it out to not push wide there, but it's still, you can see, it's still, as soon as I'm off the brakes, I'm on the throttle, but it also looks like everybody else is too, so. But Dan, you can probably, if you're able to get that brake trace up, Austin, you're pretty close. You peaked at 74%. Breno, you're capped at 64%, 66. So maybe that's your foot, because the other term was 62%. But you're downshifting really early. I'm probably downshifting too late here, which is a little crazy, but I think it's just helping carry a little bit more momentum into the turn, because I'm coming down and then I start downshifting about halfway through my brake trace, which is kind of crazy. I'm going to keep this as a mental note for tonight. All right. Okay, we'll move on. Sorry. Again, I'm trying to make this quick. So then we get into this section here. This is a little bit of a weird turn. Heavy braking, tapering off. So I broke late there. Breno, you're braking the earliest, which your speed trace is going to show that. I think I just downshift late. Maybe that's something I need to work on. Then you pushed wide, Breno. You can see that here. So that must have been a little bit of a mistake, which understandable. But I'm curious, so you broke the earliest. What made you go wide there? What made you go wide? Downshift. Downshift. That turn in. So you still have the highest RPM, so that could be your downshifting. Still at the highest RPM. And then you drop down, but that's because everybody starts getting on. So what is making you... You have the highest steering angle too, so your steering angle, you might be putting a little too much steering angle in, which might be why you're pushing those front tires. Probably you're asking probably a little too much of those front tires. So it pushed you a little bit wide, but your brake trace is also it. You're just not getting enough braking power. Your speed, you can see you start as the slowest at entry, and then by the time everybody is done braking, you're then the fastest. So, okay, that's why you... Sorry, had to connect those dots. So, yeah, you can see you're holding about 6 mile an hour more than me, and you're 5 mile an hour next faster than the closest person. So this, I would just say this turn, you gotta, shit, didn't mean to do that. You need to get a little bit more brake pressure in there. That's probably the biggest thing, that brake pressure right there. That's got to come up. So your other one, you were able to get to 63%. So I would say, if able, get that up. You're holding it good. It's just not enough. And I would say you could downshift a little bit later. Everybody else is downshifting. I don't know if that's going to get picked up on the recording. As soon as you hit the brakes, I mean, you're downshifting right when you hit peak. You could just maybe hold off on. I don't know how much. I know downshifting will help slow down the car, but if you're compensating with downshifting because you're not getting enough braking, I would say you need to get a little bit more pressure in going into the turns. All right, and then we'll go 5. Which is this weird turn. This turn's always a pain in my ass, because you really have to rely on the rear rotating here. Alright, so me and Breno are braking the latest. Dan and Austin are braking the earliest. Sorry, I keep looking at throttle, so letting off. So Dan is letting off and braking the earliest. Then I'm braking. Austin, were you on a fuel save? Because you have a gap in between. I don't know. This seems to be a running theme. You almost have, so that's where you let off the throttle, and then you're not on the brakes until 20, 30 feet later. So if you're on a fuel save, I get that. If you're not on a fuel save, that might be a little bit of it, because you're braking the latest. You held the most speed, but so down here, well, you were off by 0.005 of a second. Hundredths of a second. So maybe you have the move there. Tapered off. And then you're back on. So everybody looks similar there. Nothing crazy. I think everybody understands that turn's a pain in the ass. And then we get to this little section here, which is always so fun. Yeah, here again, there's a 20-foot gap. But anyway, so I hit 144.2, next closest 140.4, then 136.5 and 136.2. Austin, you're also getting all the way up to 6th gear. I don't know if you're shifting early. your RPM significantly lower because of that 6th gear. But yeah, so in here, everybody's brake trace looks similar. Breno, you got up to 59% there, so you broke a little bit harder there. And then everybody's brake trace is very similar there. We all get it. Dan, you stay in 3rd. And I wonder if Dan and Breno, you stay in 3rd. I wonder if that is pushing you a little bit wider. So yeah, you can see, Dan, you're a little bit wider coming through. The momentum will probably push you wide, but I'm sure 3rd probably isn't that bad of a gear to go through in. Probably saves the tires a little bit more. That might be a strat to use for tomorrow, but other than that, no big things there. And then we get to sunset. Ooh, I messed that up. Yeah, that's the whole turn. We'll get it. We'll cut off. So entry. And we'll go to about right there. Alright, so, and this is, I guess this turn is everybody's preference because you can see, well, me, Austin, and Dan, we like turning in very early. It helps to get a more straight line braking. You don't have to worry about the rear stepping out as much. Let it push wide. And then, yeah, Breno, I see what you're doing here. So you're staying wide and cutting in here. You're able to have a nice down. Dan, you're braking really early. Sorry. So you're braking really early. I got into ABS a couple times, but got out. Breno, you could probably brake a little bit more, but to be honest with you, you're carrying a good amount of speed. It's just you drop, by the time everybody is slowed down for apex and acceleration, you can see everybody's going a little bit faster. So what you could do is you might come to the right a little bit more, try and just miss this wall here, which will allow you to brake in a little bit more straighter of a line. And then if you want to, you can let it push out a little bit further here. So if you like come across here, and then you can let it push all the way out to your line that you're at now. You'll just have to turn a little bit more, but once you hit this turn, you can kind of floor it and get the car to the rear end to rotate around, but you also risk pushing really wide into this wall out here. So Austin, you're coming down to 2nd gear in that turn. 3rd is probably the better gear. You might be using 3rd. It depends on, what. This was your best lap that I grabbed, and it said it was the most recent. So you could probably use 3rd gear, keep a little bit more momentum up. But yeah, sorry you had to listen to my voice the whole time. There's a couple traces in here. Austin goes up to 6th and whatnot, but Austin, you're the only one that downshifts down to 2nd in sunset, so that might be something to consider. But I put a link to this in the Discord, so if you guys want to look at it, by all means, it's in there. So, but yeah, just looking at this stuff, you'll be able to really pick, you can nitpick a little bit more on your lap time. I'm not doing this to show you guys, oh, you can go faster. It's more of just allow you to refine your lap. You know, you can come in and see, oh, I'm not braking enough there, or I'm braking too much there, or I'm carrying way too much speed in that corner, and that's ultimately, you know, what's beating me up. You know, that's what this is for. If I were to add, so if I added a alien lap time that has, you know, we can just go this 157 here, which is absurd, but put him, analyze selected lap, and then we could really see. So he's red. Look, he got super fast, and look at how fast he goes through that freaking turn. How? I don't get it. I don't get it. But he brakes so... No, I'm sorry. He doesn't brake so hard. So he's braking 47% is his peak. Oh, he has something capping him out here. Look at this. The red, he's capped out 66%. Is that stay like that? $66. No, he gets to 70 there. It's just crazy sometimes looking at, you know, a fast person's lap time. How is he able to flatten his brake trace like that much? It's just flat. That's crazy to me. He holds the brakes a little bit longer, tapers them off a little bit better, and I'm sure that helps with rotation a lot more. He stays in third. Where everybody, third. Yeah, maybe third's the move through there. He stays in third. Maybe I'll try third. Dan, you might have been on to something. I'm sure it just involves slowing the car down. You gotta slow it down more than usual, but it probably helps save the tires too. And then what does he do in the sunset? So he brakes hard and he stays wide. So he stays very wide, and then cuts over inside really hard. So he stays wider than all of us and then comes to the inside of all of us and then pushes to the inside of 3 of us. So, yeah, that's crazy. But sorry, I won't keep this going any longer. I know this is probably longer than anybody really wanted to watch, but I appreciate you guys taking the time, if you took the time to watch this.